This film is dedicated to the men who have carried the tradition of American football through the years, and to the youngsters who will carry it into the future. Yale men wrote many chapters in the game's history and did much to bring it to maturity and give it to the colleges and schools of the nation. The first picture of football in this country shows Yale students on the green with the old brick row in the background. They look dignified, but from time to time the city fathers drove them from the green for being too rough. The first intercollegiate match was between Rutgers and Princeton in 1869. This, however, was soccer, in which players kick or butt a round ball, but must not run with it. Yale's first match was with Columbia in 1872, and soccer remained the intercollegiate game for the next 4 years. Rugby was the direct ancestor of American football. In 1875, Harvard, who had learned the game from McGill, beat Yale in a match which tried to combine rugby and soccer, and convinced Yale and some visiting Princeton men that rugby was the better game. Next year, playing under official rugby rules, Yale fared better and won on a field goal kicked by Oliver D. Thompson, 1879. For this game, Yale practiced with an oval rugby ball, which they had to borrow from Harvard. The ball used in the game is still in Yale's trophy room. A week later, at the invitation of Princeton, representatives of Yale, Harvard, Columbia, and Princeton met in Springfield and founded the Intercollegiate Football Association with rugby as the official game. Before the fall was over, Yale beat both Princeton and Columbia and compiled her first undefeated season. Right away, led by Captain Gene Baker and Walter Camp, they set out to improve the game. In rugby, when a man is tackled, the ball is placed in a scrum, and the players try to kick or heel it to their backfield. It seemed unfair that a team should lose the advantage of a good play, so Camp introduced the idea of having the center pass the ball to one of his own backs. In the early days, the snapback was made with the foot. Until 1882, there was no limit on the number of downs. So Camp invented a rule that a team must advance 5 yards in 3 downs or surrender the ball. His notes also include the first plans for numerical scoring. Many other changes followed. Changes in the size of the field, in the number of downs, the distance to be gained, the size and shape of the ball. But with the snapback and system of downs, the fundamentals of American football were there by 1882. Yale climbed immediately to the top of the intercollegiate ladder. In 1882 and 1883, Captain Ray Tompkins led his teams to 16 straight victories. In 1884, Willis Terry ran 110 yards from scrimmage, a record which will probably stand forever. From 1882 to 1887, Yale won 49, lost 1, and tied 2. Until 1888, tackling below the waist was illegal, and play was spread all across the field. It was considered easy to break away from a high tackle in the open, and a runner could always resort to what was politely known as brushing off. Many of these pictures are by the famous painter Frederick Remington, who played on Camp's undefeated team in 1879. Later, he sketched games and practices at a time when the camera could not record fast action. Nowadays, we think of the late years of the 19th century as a calm and peaceful era. As shown in the Yale record, dignified ladies and gentlemen came to the game by coach and four, and secure in the belief that progress had brought the dawn of eternal peace, cheered politely, albeit enthusiastically, at what they called the ardor and joy of football. On the field, however, things were different. Camp's new rule legalized tackling below the waist, and hard, low tackles made the open game obsolete overnight. The emphasis shifted to massed interference, and the play was anything but peaceful. Only one man had to stay on the line of scrimmage, and plays like the V, a Princeton invention, soon became popular. Moreover, players could get up speed before the ball was snapped. And the flying wedge, invented by Laurent Delan, a Harvard chess player, emerged as the ultimate in mass mayhem. As used by Princeton at Manhattan Field in 1893, the team lined up 10 or 15 yards back and started running in a converging phalanx. As they reached the line, the ball was put in play, and the whole mass hit the defense with shattering impact. This particular play went for 22 yards, and Princeton soon ground out a touchdown, enough to give Yale her only defeat in the 4 years Frank Hinkey played. Obviously, many loved the blood and thunder, and perhaps the police thought the spectators might want to get into the act. But cartoonists were already lampooning the lethal aspects of the game, and public outcry grew so loud that in the presidency of Teddy Roosevelt, it was almost abolished. In the meantime, Pa Corbin's team of 1888 opened the mass and momentum era with 14 straight victories and a total of 704 points to none for their opponents. This team can still fairly claim more famous football figures than any other in history. Pudge Heffelfinger, practically undisputed as the greatest guard of all time, still playing a good hard game when he was over 50, and still powerful at 80 when he came back to Yale to become one of the first men in the National Football Hall of Fame. George Woodruff, one of the great inventors of football strategy. Bum McClung, whose record of scoring 500 points in 4 seasons has stood for more than 70 years. Charlie Gill, who later coached at Dartmouth, New Hampshire, California. And the most durable of them all, Amos Alonzo Stagg, whose contributions to strategy and tactics caused Knut Rockne to say, everything in football came from Yale. Coached for 41 years at Chicago and 14 years at the College of the Pacific. Voted Coach of the Year when he was 81 years old. At 99, Yale's oldest living alumnus. Truly the grand old man of football. Legend has it that these men were giants, but lined up with the 1960 team, they would have looked pretty small. The average weight in 1960 was 199 pounds. The 1888 monsters averaged only 169. Heffelfinger at 190 was the biggest of the old-timers, and Stagg, who stood less than 5 feet 4, was their shortest. Nevertheless, they were tough, and they loved the tough mass and momentum game. Moreover, they developed an intense loyalty and tended to sneer at the modern sport. As Pa Corbin said, it is a far cry from the football of continuous 45-minute halves, 1 to 3 games a week, no substitutions without injury, no neutral zone, free use of hands and arms, free ball, flying tackle, to this over-legislated, over-restricted, over-supervised, puppet, sideline managed, helmets, arm up, pink tea commercialized basketball. These were the years of Yale's great football prosperity. Yale had a near monopoly on knowledge of strategy, tactics, and training. And this was handed from captain to captain by the men who came back each year to coach. With it went Yale's powerful traditions. As Camp said, if you are beaten by a man in your own class, shake hands with him. Do not excuse your defeat. Do not forget it. And do not let it happen again. Each year produced heroes. Frank Hinkey, 4 times All-American. At less than 150 pounds, he played with a fury that amazed even the toughest in that very tough age. There are still sober students of the game who consider him the greatest player of all time. Harry L. Williams, inventor of many basic plays. Foster Sanford, who coached Columbia and shocked Yale with their first defeat by anyone but Harvard and Princeton. Through the years, the Rules Committee struggled to curb the violence of mass and momentum football, and in 1896 required 6 men on the line of scrimmage. But by moving a lineman into the backfield, coaches were able to concentrate the attack and generate more power than ever. This film shows Yale's famous tackle-back play in the Princeton game at Yale Field in 1903. Yale's mighty tackle, Jim Hogan, pounded out most of 50 yards for a touchdown early in the game. These pictures were produced by Thomas A. Edison Films and preserved in the Library of Congress. Later, Princeton's great DeWitt ran 70 yards with a blocked kick and kicked a 53-yard field goal to give the Tigers their only win over Yale in 11 years. In 1901, when an alumni team played in honor of Yale's bicentennial, no one doubted that they were the greatest assemblage of stars ever gathered in one place. In the center, Walter Camp, who kicked off. To his right, O.D. Thompson, who scored Yale's first points against Harvard. Gordon Brown, 4 times All-American, in whose honor one of Yale's most coveted prizes is named. A dozen All-Americans, not counting Corbin and the others who played before the All-American teams were chosen. And more great names followed. Tom Shevlin, one of the cockiest and one of the best ends that ever played. Howard and Tad Jones, who never played on a losing team at Yale, and others too numerous to name. Not forgetting men who didn't play, but who carried the tradition anyway. Mike Murphy, the trainer. Pop Smith, the mascot of the 90s. Johnny Mack, who succeeded Murphy. Hocus Berkman. George Connors, men the players will never forget. In 1906, the forward pass was made legal, and Camp lost no time in developing plays. In this he was encouraged by Mrs. Camp, who was regarded by many as the equal of any coach. That fall against Harvard, Paul Vita threw 24 yards to Alcott on the 4-yard line to set up the winning touchdown. But on the whole, Yale had so much power on the ground that she left the pass for others to develop. The climax came with Ted Coy's team in 1909. Camp put 6 on his first-string All-American: Cooney, Andrus, Hobbs, Kilpatrick, Philbin, and Coy. They ran up 209 points in 10 straight victories and held their opponents scoreless. Yale rode the crest of the wave for 30 years, starting with Camp's introduction of the snapback in 1880. The record included 303 victories, 15 defeats, and 14 ties. 19 of the teams were undefeated. 10 were undefeated and untied. And so an era came to a close, the age of almost legendary heroes who created the great traditions of American football and made them an important part of the education of men.